Are there any constituency statements by our honourable members? The member for Griffith.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to read now a speech prepared by a young person in my electorate of Griffith named Hayden as part of our Raise Our Voice program. Hello, I'm Hayden from the Griffith electorate and I'm currently 17 years old and in Year 12. And as I see it, the next decade stands as a pivotal moment in Australia's national journey. To seize the opportunity of creating a national community envied by the world, comprehensive social reforms must be achieved by future national parliaments. As a young person myself, I look to the future with hesitation and a sense of fear that the current government in Australia is not doing enough to create a better nation for the people. Housing and education are issues that terrify the young people of Australia. How will we cope? At this current trajectory set by the two major parties, we won't. The introduction of further rental caps and limitations on property ownership, coupled with an ambitious housing construction program reminiscent of the 20th Century Housing Commission, is essential to combat the housing crisis that's already past dangerous levels. According to the Australia Institute of Health and Welfare, around 28,200 people aged 12 to 24 years were estimated to have been experiencing homelessness, and the scary part is how fast that number is growing. We must also prioritise the abolition of higher education fees, providing free further education for the nation's citizens, and undoing the harmful reforms of harmful reforms of John Howard. With HECS debt having increased by a further $1,723 to an outstanding $26,494 over the last financial year. It is not a great ask, nor is it radical, to give the citizens of Australia the right to be housed affordably and have the opportunity for higher education for all. The people of Australia have had enough, and as a representative democracy, the Parliament of Australia should mirror these outcries and work to create an envisaged and desired Australian community that focuses on the greater benefit of our fellow citizens. Couldn't agree more, Hayden.
Thank you. The member for Higgins.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In 2022, through a lion-hearted Labor effort, I became the first Labor member for Higgins in the seat's 75-year history. My campaign was powered by the energy and commitment of Labor members who door-knocked, staffed the pre-poll and polling day booths, phone-banked and supported my 2022 campaign in a multitude of other ways. Parliamentarians are the vanguard, but powering us are the people, the Labor people, young and older, regional and metro, from all walks of life. For us, it is about no one held back and no one left behind. We are here to roll up our sleeves and challenge the status quo that is leaving people behind or holding them back. On housing, job security, healthcare, education, discrimination, and of course tackling climate change. We are the reformers. It is a great source of pride to me that Higgins supported an Indigenous voice to Parliament when Labor people again came out in support of justice and progress. To all Labor members, but in particular those of the Malvern, Oakley, Prahran, Ashwood and Hawthorn Labor branches, my sincere thanks. While the electorate of Higgins may not exist from 2025, our great achievement in 2022 will stand in the history books, a legacy we own. It has been my great honour to have served and to continue to serve this community and to work with my Labor warriors and friends. Deputy Speaker, Ryan, a Year 9 student from Higgins, writes about our social media age limits ban. As a teenager who grew up in the presence of the internet his entire life, I feel that more often than not, social media has been a burden on the well-being of myself and many others. Giving children unrestricted access to social media does irreparable harm. I personally access social media platforms such as Discord and Snapchat at a young age, as young as 9 years old. I've witnessed the tremendous harm that platforms like Instagram have inflicted upon many young people I know. Cultivating an unhealthy standard for one's appearance destroyed the self-image of many young people, including some of my closest friends. This fosters unhealthy habits in young people, such as constant comparisons, the constant need for validation, and a heavily skewed sense of identity. Allowing children unrestricted access to social media platforms without any age verification at all exposes them to risks they cannot handle. Risks such as cyberbullying, exploitation and grooming have harmed too many Australian children. Well, thank you, Ryan, for your heartfelt words. I agree with them wholeheartedly. You have wisdom beyond your years, as a child who has been part of this grand experiment, which I believe, like you, is failing our young people, and that is why this Labor government is doing something about it.
Thank you. The member for Dawson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The class of 2024 is celebrating after graduating from high schools across the electorate of Dawson. Students have given their all over the past 13 years, from prep through primary school and finally finishing schooling at high school. They have all worked so hard. School leavers are celebrating as we speak, at schoolies, before they embark on their next journey in life, whether that be enrolling into university, getting a full-time job or trade, or taking a gap year to travel the world. Deputy Speaker, each year I sponsor the Dawson Award for a student selected by the school that fits a set criteria. This award takes its name from my electorate, which is named in honour of the former Queensland Member of Parliament, who served as Premier of Queensland from 1899 to 1903. The student recipient demonstrates leadership and motivates others, demonstrates selfless commitment to their community, has a passion for social issues and wants to make a difference, is kind and has a true desire to help others. So far, students from 15 high schools in my electorate have been awarded Dawson medals. Jacob Matchin from Home Hill State High, Verity Whelan from William Ross State High School, Eliza McNee from Bowen State High School, Eleanor Baldock from St Catherine's Catholic College, Ronald Norris from Southern Cross Catholic College, Nicole Savoni from Burdekin Catholic College, Amy Bauer from Kalen District State College, Brent Dingle from Burdekin Christian College, Dallas Mitchell from Holy Spirit College, Dominic Battersby from Mackay Christian College, Amy Williamson from Mackay Northern Beaches State High School, Olivia Murphy from Proserpine State High School, Kayla Woods from Mackay State High School, Megan Heald from Annandale Christian College, and last but not least, Jackson Riley from Whitsunday Christian College. Deputy Speaker, with a huge array of talent that I've witnessed, I'm very confident our future is in good hands. I would like to congratulate each Dawson Award recipient and wish you all the best in the future. Whatever your chosen path, it's yours for the making. You may not stay on that same path, as life throws different choices, different opportunities, and different curveballs. But what you make of your own pathway is all yours. The choice is yours. I wish you all the best. Go forth.
Thank you. The member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Yesterday was International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, marking the start of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. In my first month in my role as MP, I was asked to speak on my lived experience of domestic and family violence and sexual violence in the chamber. I have many colleagues in this chamber, family members, friends and local constituents who have experienced domestic, family and sexual violence. In Dunkley, we have some of the highest rates of domestic and family violence. It is a blight on our society and our community. To support the women, men and children experiencing violence, we have many incredible organisations and professionals doing amazing work in this space, supporting those in crisis. Anglicare, Family Life, Good Shepherd, Ozchild, Salvation Army, the Orange Door, Community Support Frankston, Mums supporting families in need, and Women's Health in the South East. The list of organisations is deep and long, and thank you to all of the staff for all you do for the women, children and families in our community. Your dedication is commendable. Too many women live in fear every day, unable to leave home or too scared to go home because the person that professes to love them is the greatest threat to their life. I've heard many stories of horrific violence during my career in the community sector and have my own lived experience. I know how totally paralysing domestic, family and sexual violence can be. Often these women turn the most horrific experiences into action and advocacy. I would like to shout out to some incredible women from Dunkley, Kathy Heffernan, Melissa Flores, Justine Lenart. You are some of the amazing women I know who've endured the scars of violence and are making incredible contributions to the lives of other women and families in our community. I am inspired by all of these women and their supporters, and to them I say this government is committing to ending violence. It's why, since coming to government, we have made record investment into ending violence. We've invested $4 billion in this important task, investments to prevent violence, to intervene where it happens, and to respond and support victim survivors to recover and heal. This is on top of $3.9 billion for legal assistance announced following National Cabinet's historic meeting to end violence against women and children. These investments also include extra funding for housing, which includes specific investments targeted at women escaping violence, which also will include, as of today, the Help to Buy initiative.
Thank you. The member for O'Connor.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I rise today to inform the House of the lengths to which a WA Labor Minister will go so as not to be seen announcing a divisive fishing ban. On Melbourne Cup Day, while the people of Esperance were watching the races, WA Environment Minister Rhys Whitby touched down in a chartered aircraft. He'd blown into the seaside town to reveal the configuration of his so-called South Coast Marine Park. Previously, thousands of Esperance people had taken to the streets to protest the widespread fishing bans that the park will entail. Rather than walk through the airport terminal like everybody else, Mr Whitby was whisked from the tarmac by a car to a beautiful twilight beach where he'd arranged a press conference. But according to the Esperance Weekender, he suddenly pulled the pin on Twilight Beach after receiving a tip-off that opponents of his fishing ban were there. In reality, a handful of supporters had gathered. I can confirm that those who Mr Whitby left in the Twilight Zone are indeed small in number. Of 6,000 respondents to my recent survey on the Marine Park, more than 90% oppose it. After his unscheduled U-turn, Mr Whitby eventually unveiled his unpopular measure, not at one of the jewels in WA's dazzling crown of beaches, as he'd planned, but back in town behind a barren garden bed outside a government office block. We now know Mr Whitby wants to lock up 20% of the fishing waters along 1,000-kilometre stretch of ocean from the border town of Eucla west to Bremer Bay. If his red tide of regulation is not resisted, the fishing communities Albany, Peaceful Bay, Nornalup, Walpole, Windy Harbour and Augusta could be next. That's why I'm heartened to hear that my WA Liberal colleague, Neil Thompson MLC, has moved to disallow the Marine Park. Mr Thompson's motion is likely to be debated in State Parliament this Thursday. Although Labor will probably use its numbers to ram the fishing ban through, Mr Thompson's motion will put the strong objections of South Coast locals on record. Mr Thompson plans to commission an urgent review on all marine parks imposed by Whitby and his WA Labor comrades. The draconian South Coast fishing ban follows WA Labor's decision to shut down the famous horizontal falls in the Kimberley. These blunt-edged bans are bludgeoning WA tourism and fishing businesses. By contrast, Mr Thompson's review will aim to maintain access for commercial and recreational fishers to their coastal waters. The Liberals know that fishing is fundamental to the West Australian way of life. Unlike Mr Whitby, we are not ashamed to show our faces in Esperance or anywhere else along the South Coast. His fishing ban is not based on science. It will imperil livelihoods and lifestyles. This is the fishing ban that the South Coast rejects. Thank you.
Thank you. The member for Eden-Monaro.
Thank you. With Christmas less than a month away, I've got the perfect Christmas present idea just for you. The Goulburn Monopoly game is now available for purchase, showcasing local heritage, recreation, cultural and environmental features of the Goulburn community. Whether that's roses in Victoria Park, barefoot bowling at the Bolo, the town's heritage buildings, or the roar of cars at One Raceway, whatever you do, just try not to go straight to Goulburn Supermax. The limited edition edition Monopoly game is raising money for Southern Tablelands Community Foundation and can be purchased online or at the Goulburn Visitor Information Centre, Top Shot Photography, Buy Right or the Big Merino. And keep a lookout for Bungendor's Monopoly Game 2, which is also being released in time for Christmas, launched by and raising money for the Bungendore Rotary Club. Well done to all involved in these brilliant ideas, and happy Christmas shopping. I'd like to celebrate Cindy Chawner from Cobargo, who has been named to represent Australia at the Invictus Games in Vancouver next year. Growing up, Cindy loved getting active, participating in swimming, running and a number of team sports. She joined the Royal Australian Air Force in 1999, initially as a Reserves Operation Officer, later serving most of her career as a Personal Capability Officer. She was deployed to the Middle East in 2010 and was medically discharged in June last year. Despite facing a range of physical and mental health challenges, she has demonstrated her remarkable resilience and will be competing in a number of events in the Invictus Games. Well done. We look forward to you representing our community and our country on the world stage. I want to congratulate Charlotte Wood, originally from Cooma, on her outstanding literary achievement. Charlotte has become the first Australian since 2014 to be shortlisted for the prestigious Booker Prize for her novel Stoneyard Devotional. The novel follows an unnamed woman who leaves her marriage and city life to live in an enclosed religious community on the Monaro Plains, near where Charlotte herself grew up. She completed much of her first draft whilst in lockdown, and then after that, her and her sisters all found out they were diagnosed with breast cancer within weeks of each other. I'm happy to report they've all beaten that. Although she didn't come away with the Booker Prize, her resilience and talent resonated deeply with readers from across the world. I'd like to congratulate Eden-Monaro's Cooma Monaro Race Club on receiving for the second year in a row the Racing New South Wales Award for Outstanding Achievement. The club began in 1856 when the first members finally gained a licence to meet and race horses at Tea Tree Flat. Although the location, the members and the names have all changed over time, the core idea to foster camaraderie through the excitement of horse racing remains. The club has consistently hard-working members who deliver high-quality competitions and race meetings. Their efforts draw thousands of people to our community, supporting local business. It is such an excellent standard at the Cooma Racecourse too for the Cooma Cup. I extend my congratulations to all involved. And finally, congratulations to Merimbula-born Jem Ryan, who has been selected in the Prime Minister's 11 squad to play India in Canberra this weekend. Well done, Jem. We're claiming you as ours still, even though you're in Ipswich now.
The member for Menzies.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, Australia's Jewish community are not just a part of Australia, but they helped build it, and many lost their lives defending it. One of them was a good friend of mine, Greg Sher, who died in Afghanistan on the 4th of January 2009, almost 15 years ago. The community gathered on the 14th of November for two reasons. One, to acknowledge him, to be with his family, and to award recipients of the Greg Sher Memorial Award in Caulfield North. It was my great honour to be there for the third year in a row. Briefly, Speaker, Greg was curious, kind, loyal, selfless, resilient, fearless, and a hero to this nation and to his community. He didn't just serve in the ADF, he was also a key member of the community security group who were there to host the event. So I thank them, their volunteers, their donors, and Justin Kagan, who leads it. Felix and Yvonne, Greg's parents, were there, and I also want to acknowledge his brothers, Stephen and Barry, and their partners, Ronald and Nim, and their children, many, many children that Greg never got to meet, but I know they're proud of him. I can't list all of the winners, Speaker, but I'll list the schools. So Beth Rivka Ladies College had 4 students, 2 from Year 5 and 2 from Year 11. Bialik College had 4, again 2 from Year 5 and 2 from Year 11. King David School had 2 from Year 5 and 2 from Year 11, and you see a pattern here. Those were the key years that have been acknowledged. Liebler Yavna College had 4 students, again from each of those year levels. Mount Scopus had 4, 2 from each year level. Sholem Al-Hashem College had 2 from Year 5. Yeshiva College had 2 from each year level. And then finally, United Jewish Education Board in their various campuses had 3 from Year 5 and 2 from Year 11. At this moment in time, I know that Greg would probably be doing 2 things. He would still be a reserve commando serving his nation and prepared to go to war. He would also be giving up his time to help the Jewish community, whether it is in front of places of worship or on campus or at events, because Greg exemplified the very definition of someone who gives of others. And so to the students who received an award in his name, I know that you are worthy winners. I know that you too will be people who are curious, kind, loyal, selfless, resilient, and fearless. And you have an award that is in his name, and you do him a great honour, because as Barry Sher said to me, wherever you can, say his name, and I always will.
Thank you. The member for Spence.
Thank you, Speaker. In case you missed it, the federal Labor government, in partnership with the South Australian Labor government, is fixing the dangerous intersection of Curtis Road and Heaslip Road, just outside Anglevale, with a brand new dual-lane roundabout. Our community has spoken, we have listened, and now we're getting a game-changing outcome. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop listening either. And I say that because many members of my community, upon hearing this announcement last week, they wanted to know why we can't fix the rest of Curtis Road. They're saying that because at certain times the entire road can become impossible to navigate due to congestion. And I agree that they should know why this is the case, and I'll gladly answer their question. In order to fix Curtis Road, the City of Playford, who are the local government exclusively responsible for maintaining it, they need to come to the table and apply for relevant funding to get that work started. Other levels of government can't do it for them. I point this out because a few people have said to me, including some Playford Council members, that either the state or federal government need to take the first step to fix Curtis Road. This simply isn't true. That can't happen because Curtis Road is a local government road. But more importantly still, this blame game just needs to stop altogether. Curtis Road won't get fixed if Council continue trying to pass the buck for a road change they're in charge of to the state or federal governments. We need to collaborate, and we can do that already through grant opportunities like the federal government's housing support program. The Heaslip Road, Curtis Road roundabout, for example, is being funded through that program, with the federal government providing 50% cost through one of these grants. That's because the state government, who are covering the other half of the cost, did actively pursue a solution to a dangerous intersection they maintain, and good on them too. This same grant was available to Council, but they chose not to improve Curtis Road with it. Instead, they applied for federal money to spend on a nice arena in Elizabeth. And I'm not suggesting that every grant Playford have applied for, which doesn't improve Curtis Road, is a waste of money. Throughout my term, Playford have applied for federal funding for a variety of projects that benefit my community, and I acknowledge that wholeheartedly. But I do want Curtis Road to be the City of Playford's highest priority. And I also want the City of Playford to actively approach and work with other levels of government to fix it, rather than suggest a road that's their responsibility is for someone else to look at. I want these things because they're the only way we're going to fix Curtis Road, and that's something I'll never stop working towards until it's done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Speaker, I seek leave to table the names of the winner of the Greg Sher Memorial Award for this year.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Thank you. Is that all we do? Yeah. Thank you. The member for Latrobe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I recently had the great honour of attending the world-renowned Summer Community Festival at St Mina and St Marina's Coptic Orthodox Church in Hallam. This festival, which has been cherished tradition for nearly 30 years, continues to grow bigger and bigger each year, bringing joy and unity to the community. I attended this fantastic event alongside Zaid Safi, the Liberal candidate for Bruce. And it was truly heartwarming to see so many families and children enjoying the fantastic community market stalls, indulging in traditional Egyptian sweets, saving Mediterranean-style foods and participating in a variety of kids' activities. And I extend my deepest gratitude to the much-loved Father Abdul Attallah and Father Michael Gully for their kind invitation and warm hospitality. Can I say they are absolutely loved and admired by all their worshippers, and Father Abdullah You knew everyone's name, and it was great to go around with you, and also Father Michael, being a former detective of Victoria Police, we really hit it off. Their dedication was truly inspiring. The biannual festival is not just a celebration, it's also a significant fundraiser for the Church's Sunday School and Childcare Centre. The funds raised during this event play a crucial role in supporting these vital programs which provide invaluable services to the children and the families. And can I just say, the congregation, they're washing cars, they're buying food, they're just doing incredible work. Also congratulate Father Michael Gully at the church for their efforts to run Mana for Life Ltd, established in Melbourne in 2012 and working with volunteers to support and provide relief for underprivileged youth and elderly through humanitarian services. Today, Mana for Life focuses on alleviating poverty amongst underprivileged communities and the homeless, supporting youth and adolescents, providing financial assistance to low-income families, promoting basic health and hygiene standards within the communities. Hard work and commitment are what makes the Summer Community Festival event and relief support for the community possible, and these efforts are deeply appreciated by the Egyptian and wider communities. The St Mina and St Marina's Coptic Orthodox Church is a shining example of what can be achieved when we all come together as a community. I thank again all those on the day when we attended, a very exciting time for all those at the church, and as I said before, the way the congregation and all those there support their church, from, as I said, washing cars to providing funding to the stalls, all to help other people, is a great achievement to them. Thank you.
A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions.
And I call the Minister for Industry and Science.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In this modern day and age, it's easy to forget the heavy reliance many in our community place on bricks and mortar bank branches. The fact is, conducting bank business over the internet is difficult for some of our citizens, and technology may not always be available, and there'll be fears about the safety of electronic payments, and those shouldn't be sneered at. And there's the simple convenience, the reassuring face-to-face contact at a branch, which is a big deal for a large number of customers. And that's an undeniable fact. It was recently brought to the fore in the electorate I'm proud to represent in Chifley with the announcement, amazingly, that the Commonwealth Bank is planning to close its Doonside branch. This move's attracted much local concern, leading to a united call from our community for the bank to reverse its decision. And in my capacity as the member for Chifley, I was asked to relay these concerns directly to senior management in the Commonwealth Bank, and I emphasise that closing the branch will have very negative consequences for people who can least afford them. Senior citizens, pensioners in particular, have a heavy reliance on the face-to-face banking that's provided, and there's an understandable unwillingness to give up standards of customer service that they're accustomed to and frankly have paid for. Additionally, the branch at Doonside affords many small business owners a safe and convenient way to conduct their cash banking on which they've come to rely. And the closure of the Doonside branch will mean a trip to the bank will take longer and impact unfairly on loyal CBA customers already dealing with rising expenses. If the closure goes ahead, they'll be forced to travel to branches in Blacktown, Mount Druitt, Plumpton to conduct passbook transactions and the like currently available in Doonside. These same customers, pensioners, older citizens, small business operators are on fixed or limited incomes with little or no capacity to absorb extra cost. And while, of course, it's necessary for any business to review its operations, I've impressed on the Commonwealth Bank the need to be conscious of the bank's universal service obligations and reminded them of the impossible situation in which the decision is placing many in our community. I've followed this up with written representations to the bank, asking them for an urgent discussion of these issues, and I'm calling on them to defer at the very least until such time as myself or the community has had a chance to discuss face-to-face with the Commonwealth Bank the impact of this closure. On behalf of my community, I'm insisting on a commitment by the bank to ensure maintenance of customer service standards, especially for older customers. Banks have a responsibility to engage with customers in a way that customers feel comfortable. For many, of course, that'll be by digital means, for others, face-to-face. They've got a right to expect that wish will be respected and facilitated in a way that doesn't impose costs on those who cannot afford it.
In accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for member constituency statements is concluded, and I call on the clerk.
Government business. Next order of the day, surveillance legislation, confirmation of application Bill 2024, resumption of debate on second reading.
And I call on the member for Griffith. Sorry.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. The Greens will support this bill here but reserve our position in the Senate. We do that simply because this is another apparently urgent bill from the government that we were provided no notice of and without the benefit of a government briefing despite requests. It's disappointing that once again to have a bill sprung on us by the government to fix a legal issue that on the face of it should have been identified many years ago. The Surveillance Legislation Bill 2024 will provide that information received under warrants issued by the AFP was, to quote, not intercepted while passing over a telecommunication system and was lawfully obtained under those warrants consistent with the Parliament's intention, end quote. This bill will retrospectively state that these warrants were not intercepts but were instead valid warrants under the Surveillance Devices Act. It only applies to 11 warrants issued by the AFP and does not change the law going forward. Essentially, this will retrospectively validate the collection of information relating to Operation Ironside, which was an FBI-initiated drug crime investigation taken on in Australia by the AFP. This will in turn be relevant for current cases on foot against those who have been charged as a result of the information gathered during Operation Ironside. The AFP Commissioner announced the results of Operation Ironside on 8 June 2021, and it is now 26 November 2024, and the government is legislating about the warrants used in that operation. This is another case of the AFP being better prepared for their media releases than they are for the basic police work needed to stack them up. In this case, ensuring the warrants they issued are valid for the information they are seeking to obtain. Ensuring the rule of law is complied with and that police and other security agencies are acting within the law is essential work for the Greens. The Greens do not want to stand in the way of the prosecutions for Operation Ironside, but we do want answers about why this legal impediment was not uncovered many years ago if this operation was properly considered and passed through legal channels in the AFP.
And I give the call to the question is that the bill now be read a second time, and I call the attorney.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank honourable members for their contributions on this bill. This bill makes clear that information collected under specified warrants independently issued to the Australian Federal Police under the Surveillance Devices Act 2004 and the Crimes Act 1914 in connection with Operation Ironside was not intercepted while passing over a telecommunications system within the meaning of the Telecommunications Interception and Access Act 1979. The bill is consistent with the decisions made in the Supreme Court of South Australia by a single judge and by the South Australian Court of Appeal. The bill is targeted in its scope, dealing only with warrants issued in connection with Operation Ironside. The bill does not affect any other previous, current or future AFP operations. I thank the House.
That the bill be now read a second time. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Right. The ayes have it. The question is that... Oh, the clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to confirm the application of surveillance device and related legislation and for related purposes.
The Federation Chamber will now consider the bill in detail. I understand it is the wish of the Federation Chamber to take the bill as a whole. The question is that the bill be agreed to.
I present a supplementary explanatory memorandum to the bill.
Attorney. Do you want to move?
I move the government amendment as circulated.
The question is that the amendment be agreed to. All those the opinion say aye.
Aye.
The question is that the bill... The ayes have it. And the question is that the bill be agreed to. The bill as amended has been agreed to. The question now is that this bill be reported to the House with no amendments. All those the opinion say aye. With an amendment, sorry. All those opinions say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. The ayes have it. And I call the clerk.
Government business. Next order of the day. Commonwealth entities. Payment surcharges bill 2024. Resumption of debate on second reading.
The debate is resumed on this bill. I advise the Federation Chamber that in the House it has been agreed that a general debate be allowed covering this bill. The Commonwealth Entities Payment Surcharges Tax Imposition Bill 2024 and the Commonwealth Entity Payment Surcharges Consequential Provisions and Other Matters Bill 2024. I call the clerk. Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to sum up the debate for the Commonwealth Entities Payment Surcharges Bill 2024, Commonwealth Entities Payment Surcharges Tax Imposition Bill 2024 and Commonwealth Entities Payment Surcharges Consequential Provisions and Other Matters Bill 2024. I thank those members who've contributed to this debate. These three bills formalise long-standing Commonwealth practices by providing express, modernised and consistent legislative authority for Commonwealth entities to continue to charge and collect payment surcharges where the entity has legislative authority to collect a payment. The package of bills does not impose new surcharges on those interacting with the Commonwealth, but instead formalises the existing practices of Commonwealth entities under a new, modernised, whole-of-government framework. To that end, the bills authorise the collection of surcharges by Commonwealth entities from 1 January 2003 to align with when the Reserve Bank of Australia first regulated payment surcharging as part of the then broader payments reforms. The bills will also enable the responsible minister to make Commonwealth surcharging policies by legislative instrument to support moving forward a consistent approach, a consistent whole-of-government approach to surcharging, including ensuring that any surcharging is applied on a cost recovery basis only. This will also facilitate adoption of any changes to whole-of-government surcharging policy by Commonwealth entities quickly and efficiently. This package of bills supports the government's broader commitment to reviewing and reforming the imposition of card payment surcharges. The government is prepared to permanently ban all surcharges on debit cards from 1 January 2026, subject to further work by the Reserve Bank of Australia and safeguards to ensure both small business and consumers can benefit from lower costs. While the Reserve Bank of Australia completes its important work on the surcharging review and how payment fees can be reduced economy-wide, we will stop passing on debit surcharges from the Australian Taxation Office and Services Australia from 1 January 2025. I commend these bills to the House.
The question is that this bill now be read a second time. All those the opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. So I'll put the question at... Hold on, I've just got... So I'll call the clerk.
Second reading. A bill for an act to authorise Commonwealth entities to charge and collect payment surcharges and for related purposes.
Okay. If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I will put the report question immediately that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. The question is that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those the opinion say aye. Aye. No. And I call on the clerk.
Government business. Next order of the day. Commonwealth Entities Payment Surcharges Tax Imposition Bill 2024. Resumption of the debate on the second reading.
And I call the Assistant Treasurer.
Deputy Speaker, this is the second bill of a package of three bills, and the remarks that I have made on the first of the bills apply equally to this bill. I commend it to the House.
Right. So that this bill be read a second time. I put the question, does this bill be read a second time? All those the opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary no, and I call on the clerk.
Second reading. A bill for an act to impose a tax relating to payment surcharges and for related purposes.
If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I'll put the question immediately that the question is that the bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those the opinion say aye. Aye. No, the ayes have it. And I call the clerk. I think that's the third of his bills.
Government business. Next order of the day. Commonwealth Entities Payment Surcharges, Consequential Provisions and Other Matters Bill 2024. Resumption of the debate on the second reading.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This is the third of the package of three bills. My remarks on the opening bill apply equally to it, and I commend it to the House.
I put the question that the bill be read a second time. And I call the clerk. So if no member wishes So the question is that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. Call the clerk. I've got my L plates on, so I'm confused with all these different things.
Second reading. A bill for an act to deal with consequential matters arising from the enactment of the Commonwealth Entities Payment Surcharges Act 2024 and with certain payment surcharges and for related purposes.
If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I'll put the report question immediately. The question is that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those the opinion say aye.
Aye.
No. That one's done. I call the clerk.
Next order of the day, Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme Amendment Bill 2024, resumption of debate on the second reading.
And I call the member for Duray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme Amendment Bill 2024 will address the gap in the professional indemnity insurance market. This gap has prevented eligible midwives from accessing insurance when attending home birth for Australian mothers. The uncertainty that this created in regard to the exemptions to professional indemnity insurance for privately practising midwives has acted as a barrier for Australian women who wish to home birth, and uncertainty for the midwives who would like to provide these services. In response, this bill expands the MPIS to ensure professional indemnity insurance coverage for eligible midwives providing home birth services, intrapartum care outside of a hospital and at birth centres. The Coalition supports this legislation as it provides Australian women with the option to make their own supported and informed choices when it comes to home birth. By expanding access to professional indemnity insurance, the bill supports eligible midwives in delivering safe and accessible care, including home births and intrapartum care outside of hospitals for non-complicated births. This will support greater choice for Australian women and families in their pregnancy journey, particularly assisting mothers in rural and remote Australia who face additional challenges in accessing maternity services within a hospital setting. It will allow Australian women greater choice to birth at home with their chosen midwife, with the security of knowing professional indemnity insurance is available in the case of an adverse event. In the midst of a serious workforce crisis which is impacting almost all facets of our healthcare system, supporting healthcare professionals to work to their full scope of practice is integral to ensuring Australians have access to the healthcare services they need. This bill places trust on eligible midwives to practice to their full scope by allowing them to provide home birth and intrapartum care outside of hospital within the safety net of professional indemnity insurance. The Coalition understands that Australian women need to be supported to be able to make choices about how they want to live their lives, and that starts with making sure governments are supporting women with their health. The Coalition wants to ensure that women across Australia can access care and that we understand their needs and their experiences. Supporting the health and well-being of Australian women and girls is an absolute priority for the Coalition, which is why we will be supporting this legislation.
A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions. was going to call the member for Durack in continuation, but I'll call the member for Blair.
Speak on the Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme Amendment Bill 2024. The background to this is that the role of midwives in the issue of health funding and insurance became very obvious back in 2002, and indeed probably prior to that, after the insurance market really collapsed after 9/11. The landmark obstetric birth injury case, which resulted in a payout of about $11 million, and that initiated a crisis of confidence in the industry with respect to midwives around the country. At that time, there was about 200 privately practising midwives, and they were paying about $800 a year in insurance. That's simply not a big enough pool of funds to contemplate a payout of that magnitude, and obviously the insurance for midwives was a long-standing issue. The Coalition is then in government, by the way, for another nearly 6 or 7 years to resolve the issues and simply did nothing. We, in 2008, directed the Commonwealth Chief Nurse and Midwifery Officer, Rosemary Bryant, to conduct a review of midwifery services in Australia. A number of colleagues of mine, including myself, met with midwives and lobbied the government to resolve this issue. I met with midwives across Queensland and spoke at a number of events, including a forum that was held by Maternity Coalition in the state of Queensland. There are a number of local advocates across southeast Queensland who pushed this issue. We brought forward 3 bills before the House in 2009 to support Australian midwives. There were some anomalies that emerged after this legislation. The purpose of the Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contributions Scheme Act of 2010 and the associated Midwife Professional Indemnity Run-off Cover Support Payment 2010 also was to support MBS and PBS arrangements enabling the establishment of a government-supported professional indemnity scheme for eligible midwives by the 1st of July 2010. There was an unintended consequence in that the insurance seemed to cover those particular who were dealing with private hospitals and large private obstetric practices as employers, but it didn't really cover midwives who were self-employed in private practice in a sort of one-on-one setting or a small setting. So the bill, there was also some tax anomalies that weren't covered as well, and so we brought forward a piece of legislation back in 2011, which was the Professional Midwives Professional Indemnity Legislation Amendment Bill 2011, to fix some of those anomalies which had created higher tax on insurers of eligible midwives. So we fixed a lot of those problems, but it really continued this issue on for another decade, frankly, to be honest with you. And despite meeting with midwives across my electorate and elsewhere in southeast Queensland, this continued. During the Morrison government, they simply did, and Abbott and Turnbull governments, they simply did nothing, frankly. It was a Labor government that attended to this issue previously with Prime Ministers Rudd and Gillard, then crickets, by the way, under Abbott, Turnbull and Morrison. And we've come in here, and I want to pay tribute to the Assistant Minister for Health and Aged Care, the member for Cooper, who's driven this inside our government, and I want to pay tribute to her fine work. It might have had something to do with her previous vocation as a nurse and her advocacy, by the way, in terms of her leadership at the ACTU as well. But I want to pay tribute to Jed. Thank you very much for the work you've done, member for Cooper. At the outset, I want to say we're committed to making sure that midwives are empowered. We want to make sure we have a health workforce which is satisfied and retained. We want to enhance maternity care and ensure better health outcomes for Australian women and their family, and want to improve choice. It's not all just about the medicalisation. Midwives have been around for millennia helping women, and we want to make sure that women have the opportunity for choice. But we want to make sure those midwives are properly covered if they're privately practising with insurance system, if they're providing home births and intrapartum care outside of a hospital. They've got to have proper insurance coverage in today's world. So we're acting to cover this gap by providing privately practising midwives with a temporary exemption from the Health Practitioners Regulation National Law Act of 2009 to ensure they continue to provide these services and give expectant mothers choice in how they want the birth of their child to occur. The 2024-25 budget then provided a permanent solution to the Commonwealth covering the cost of professional negligence claims for eligible midwives providing home birth services, eligible midwives providing intrapartum care outside of a hospital, and eligible entities employing or engaging eligible midwives to provide intrapartum care outside of hospital, including birth centres, as part of the birthing on country models of care. And it's my hope that after having spoken on this type of bill before, on multiple occasions in Parliament and outside, that this bill fixes the problem that's been ongoing for decades. This bill builds on the budget measures we've undertaken amending the Midwives Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme legislation of 2010, which I referred to earlier in my speech, ensuring that eligible midwives practising outside of hospital settings have access to professional indemnity insurance. Tragically, there are some people in the medical profession and hospital administration that have a sort of almost a sort of negative approach to midwives and who haven't understood that it should be up to a woman to choose. I believe should be up to a woman to choose in relation to a pregnancy and a choice in relation to the manner in which the birth should take place. The bill provides a framework under which the government will pay 100% of eligible claims for relevant intrapartum services provided outside of hospital. And the expansion of the Act ensures the insurance coverage is there for home births and intrapartum care outside of hospital, conducted in accordance with the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia's safety and quality guidelines for privately practising midwives, and that's really important. And the bill provides scope for rules to be made to specify the intrapartum services covered by the scheme. It also extends 100% coverage to eligible entities such as Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisations, or ACHOs, that employ midwives as part of birthing on country models of care, and that's particularly important. It's also very important in your electorate, Member for Lingiari, Deputy Speaker. The bill will take effect from the 1st of July 2025 and provide a permanent solution to address gaps in professional indemnity insurance coverage for eligible midwives. The bill supports eligible midwives to practice their full scope of practice, giving women greater choice. And I think it's important, as I said, for that access to be done in a culturally safe birthing on country services, and that's not always the case. This approach supports the delivery of safe and accessible care and reflect consultation feedback that raised concerns in relation to previous proposals to develop a definition of low-risk home birth. The bill promotes the rights of individuals to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, as it improves economic access to maternity services. The bill provides certainty to the current professional indemnity insurer of the Commonwealth's ongoing commitment to subsidise the costs associated with professional negligence claims against eligible midwives, and helps them manage claims with the government as insurer of last resort for those expanded services. Tragically, when I was a practising lawyer in my younger days, and I did quite a number of medical negligence cases, some associated with the birth of children, can I just say, far more often in a hospital than in a home birth situation. The legislation addressed a clear market failure, as I alluded to before, and I think this is a very positive outcome for Australian women and their families. Women can choose to birth at home with the choice of their midwife, knowing that professional indemnity insurance is available in the case of an adverse event. Secondly, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, or women pregnant with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander babies, will have access to continuous, culturally safe birthing on country services with an insured midwife. Thirdly, eligible midwives will be able to practice their full scope of practice, offering those home births and intrapartum care outside the hospital, with the safety net of professional indemnity insurance. There's been so much consultation in relation to this, and as I say, this is about choice and control. It's about empowering women. It's about making sure they can choose their birthing environment. It aligns to our broader goal of gender equality and fosters an inclusive healthcare environment where women can have access to continuous, culturally safe care. It aligns with the woman-centric care woman-centred care, strategic directions for Australian Maternity Services woman-centred care strategy. Of particular importance to Australian families is the fact that they need that high-quality, respectful maternity care. It recognises the need for women to make those choices. We've made a number of reforms in this area to improve the space to attract more people into midwifery and financial viability of independent midwives. From the 1st of November this year, we removed the red tape that prevents endorsed midwives and nurse practitioners operating their full scope of practice. By legislating to remove collaborative arrangements, nursing and endorsed midwives will now be eligible to independently provide the full range of Medicare and prescribe certain pharmaceutical benefits medications. This change empowers midwives to work to their full scope of practice, improving access to quality care, particularly in rural and remote communities and regional communities as well. We're invested in the Australian health workforce by upskilling the nation's nurses and midwives through a $50.2 million scholarship, and the Primary Care Nursing and Midwifery Scholarship Program provides 1,850 postgraduate scholarships over 4 years for registered midwives and nurses to become nurse practitioners and endorsed midwives in primary and aged care. And that program strengthens the health workforce, particularly in rural areas. On top of this, the eligible students have access to $319.50 per week as part of the Albanese Labor government's establishment of a new Commonwealth prac payment for students to help them manage the costs associated with the undertaking of mandatory placements. This will support midwifery students undertake their studies and, of course, address the cost of living. There are additional supports that we've provided, but I've got to tell you, Deputy Speaker, I am very pleased about this because this is a long-standing issue that I have been involved in for a long time and advocated along with some of my colleagues, some of whom were not here still in this parliament. So this is about the Albanese Labor government improving women's health outcomes by listening to women and addressing systemic biases in the health system against women and taking important steps to build women's health into the foundation of a stronger Medicare system. I'm pleased to support this legislation. It's the culmination of a lot of work by a lot of advocates, too many to name, that I think of the meetings I've had in my office, and I think of the fora I've gone to, and I want to thank all of them for what they've done and know that this will help women by providing greater choice and control of their bodies. Thank you very much.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Indi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to acknowledge the words from the member for Blair. Thank you so much for stepping us through what has been a long and at times complicated labour in the birth of this incredibly important legislation. As many members of this House know, I am still a registered midwife, but no longer a practising midwife, and time honours the brave. Many of us worked long and hard and fought for reforms such as this right back to the 1990s, and I remember what the member for Blair was telling us about at those reforms that started in 2002 and then legislative changes in 2011. I remember them all. And I thank him for his contribution to making those changes then. And he also acknowledged Rosemary Bryant, and I remember the work of Rosemary very well also. I'm just so pleased, thrilled actually, to rise to speak to the Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme Amendment Bill 2024. And if that young midwife back in the 90s could have possibly thought that she would end up in the Parliament on the day when this legislation was being debated, she certainly would not have believed it. So, you know, those lovely things that happen from time to time about writing a letter to your younger self, well, this is a letter I don't think I ever would have written. So this is important. This bill will provide a framework which will allow the government to pay 100% of eligible claims for relevant intrapartum services provided outside of a hospital. And this aims to ensure professional indemnity insurance coverage for eligible midwives providing home birth services, eligible midwives providing intrapartum care outside of a hospital, and eligible entities employing or engaging eligible midwives to provide intrapartum care outside of a hospital, including birth centres, as part of birthing on-country models of care. Fantastic models of care that are women-centred, that are parent-focused, that are baby-friendly, and that are evidence-based. What that means in practice is that eligible midwives will have access to the financial protection they need to confidently practice to the full scope of their skills, to exercise their work away from hospitals in places where women choose to birth, and to do that safely and confidently with the full protection of indemnity insurance. Equally, Madam Deputy Speaker, mothers, parents now have the full confidence in knowing that in exercising their choice to give birth at home under the professional care of an eligible midwife, that they have this insurance coverage. This is really important, really important. Under current insurance arrangements, there's a significant gap in insurance coverage for midwives to provide intrapartum care outside of a hospital, severely limiting access to home birth and really limiting access to models of care so critical in our First Nations communities, such as the birthing on-country models of care. And the member for Blair outlined very clearly why that was the case. Such small numbers of midwives unable really to collectively contribute to the pool that would be required to get a commercially available insurance product. This has been a problem for a very long time. And basically no insurers have been willing to provide the cover for intrapartum care outside of hospital, in part because of the small pool of resources, but also in accurately quantifying risks, because home birth in Australia is very small because of the barriers that we've had to exercising and offering that model of care to women. And this situation has created a very real barrier for women who wish to home birth, and real uncertainty for those midwives who wish to respond to the choices of women. And that's what midwives want to do. They want to provide care that's evidence-based, that fulfills their full scope of practice and is what a woman wants. Because if we combine those two things together, we know we get great outcomes. So as a result, women were at risk of being transferred to hospital much earlier if they were in a home birth setting, often transferred much earlier than clinically necessary, and the continuation of culturally safe care and essential birthing on country, because of that, was in jeopardy as well. So we had some unintended consequences, really. Women entering the hospital system much, much earlier than they ever would have needed to if this insurance was available. The bill provides scope for rules to be made to specify the intrapartum services covered under the Expanded Midwife Professional Indemnity Scheme, the MPIS. The government's broad intent is to cover out-of-hospital intrapartum services where they're provided in compliance with the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia's safety and quality guidelines for privately practising midwives. And this bit's really important because sometimes labours start to get a bit tricky right at the end, right before that baby is born. And there has been some to and fro in trying to work out what are the criteria for a home birth that would be covered by this insurance. And I'm so pleased, just so pleased, that the government have decided to embrace the Nursing and Midwifery Board's safety and quality guidelines, because they lay out very, very clearly the criteria that is important for a home birth. It's tried and true, it's evidence-based, and that's what we want. So absolutely delighted about that. Make no mistake, this change will allow more women and birthing parents greater choice to birth at home with their choice of midwife. So not only at home, but with the person they want to have at home. This continuity of care, I can't overstate how important it is. This is really important that they can do this with the full confidence of knowing that if there is, in the rare occasion, an adverse event, they're covered. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, or women pregnant with a baby, an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander baby, will have access to culturally safe birthing on country services. And Deputy Speaker, I know you know about this. I know you know what this means to First Nations women in Australia. Eligible midwives will be able to practice, as I said, to their full scope of practice, offering home births within the safety net of professional indemnity insurance. As I said, this legislation hasn't been an easy birth, and I want to acknowledge the years, decades of dedicated work from midwives, from consumers, from parents across Australia, from the fantastic Australian College of Midwives, in the work to develop a fit-for-purpose private indemnity insurance product for individually practising midwives. The Australian College of Midwives have engaged for many years with government and with the Department of Health and Aged Care to seek to contribute to the planning for an insurance solution. They've done this in good faith, they've done it consistently, and they've done it successfully. I want to acknowledge the efforts of the Chief Nursing and Midwifery Officer, Alison McMillan, for her work in delivering this solution that ensures public safety without imposing unnecessary restrictions. This is so important. And of course, I absolutely applaud Assistant Minister Jed Carney, the member for Cooper, and I see her fantastic staff over here. I know how much work you've put into this. I know the way that you engage with the people at the centre of the decisions this government is making when it comes to evidence-based, safe, affordable, high-quality maternal care. So thank you so much for your work. You have championed this bill and then shepherded the bill really into the House. Women all over Australia, let me say, at all stages of their life, through access to long-acting contraception, to birth, to menopause, to benefiting from so much of the work of Minister Carney in this short term of Parliament. So thank you. Thank you very much to the member for Cooper, the Assistant Minister for Health. The current insurance exemption will be extended one final time to the 31st of December 2026, and I know how often midwives hang on this last extensions. We've been doing this for years. And I want to just, any of them listening, please know this is the final time, and this is to allow sufficient time to transition to these new arrangements and for regulation and policies to be amended and implemented. Let me just reflect a little on why this matters. Planned home birth involves care from midwives who are registered experts in childbirth, and they want to do so in a woman's home. And these registered midwives working privately are there from often from conception right through to 6 weeks postpartum, so that familiar face, not having to retell your story, is absolutely critical to a birthing woman. And the research is absolutely clear on this, that for women with low-risk pregnancies, planned home births attended by qualified midwives is safe and satisfying. It's satisfying. It sets people up for a positive experience of parenting. The research is absolutely clear, and we know that home births, when cared for by a highly qualified midwife, do result in less intervention than hospital births. Of course, there's a whole lot of parameters around that if you want to understand the research in more detail, but it's really clear that less intervention, and most importantly also, or equally as importantly, is that they perceive their experiences much more positively. Midwives provide safe and well-regulated home birth care, and as a former midwife, I really welcome this approach by the government to underwrite this insurance. I know this is being celebrated right around Australia, and I know this because many women and many consumers, many dads, many midwives have contacted me about this legislation. I've sat down with a lot of them, and many of the mothers actually share with me, and we saw this in the New South Wales inquiry into birth trauma, but many of them have shared with me some very deep personal trauma that they have experienced through previous births. And for them, the only way that they can truly feel in control and have a real say in their next birth is to have a home birth, that it empowers them and it sets them up in a situation that they want to be. One woman said, being from a rural area with very limited continuity of care midwifery options, home birth offers me the right to choose my place of birth and my care provider. Another one said, my home is where I feel safe to give birth. I was really pleased to meet with Louise Thornton, a registered midwife with more than 18 years' experience. Louise is from Yakandanda in my electorate, along with Ree from Your Birth Photography and others, to talk about how important this reform is to so many in Indi, and I was able to say to them, don't you worry, I am batting for this big time. I want to acknowledge that there is a lot of fear associated with giving birth, and much of it we can mitigate by giving women control over the decisions that affect their body. And we know that much of the move of some women to taking choices around free birth, where there is no professional care, is because of the issues they've had in accessing home birth. And this, again, is a fantastic remedy to address the trauma that many women have experienced and help them to utilise home birth with a qualified midwife. I also, in the few minutes I've got left, I want to recognise the other significant reforms in the rollback of collaborative arrangements and the increased access to PBS-listed medicines for endorsed midwives. This is a package in so much as, again, Assistant Minister Carney has worked so hard to make sure that we truly acknowledge that midwives are primary maternity care providers. And the reforms that we're seeing with this legislation and other legislation is that we finally are recognising the essential role of the midwife, the need to remove the barriers which stand between the midwife, their professional expertise, and the women they care for. As I said, a very long time ago, I worked as a midwife and set up a midwifery group practice with continuity of care under a known midwife, and these reforms were part of our fight for achieving choice, control and evidence-based care where the women was at the centre. Back then, many women would have loved to have accessed a home birth, but they could not. But maybe their grandchildren will be born at home thanks to this fantastic legislation. It's deeply joyful to now be a Member of Parliament and speak on this bill. And finally, I want to acknowledge my co-chairs on the Parliamentary Friends of Maternal Health, the member for Canberra and the member for Wide Bay, and the work that they do alongside me and alongside many consumers across Australia in continuing to put forward the absolute essential nature that we get the care of women through pregnancy, birth and postpartum right, because that's how we set up our nation to be healthy and to live the best possible lives that they can. Start early, start right. This bill really helps us achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that this bill now be read a second time, and I call the member for Moreton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme Amendment, an important piece of legislation because it extends the existing Midwife Professional Indemnity Scheme, a scheme that supports midwives to do their vital work with confidence. And I chose to do this, to speak on this legislation for two reasons. One, because my mum started studying midwifery but didn't finish it. Instead, she had 10 children. And because my neighbour Rachel is a midwife. So in a nutshell, this legislation means that eligible midwives who work in out-of-hospital settings can access the same professional indemnity insurance as their colleagues who practice in hospitals. And this underpins Labor's belief that women should be able to choose where they give birth and wherever it is, to be able to do so safely. If they choose not to deliver in a hospital, women should be able to trust that they will receive equally safe, high-quality, respectful and woman-centred care. The Australian College of Midwives describes the role of midwife as a maternity care specialist with the knowledge and capability to ensure the best health outcomes for mother and baby. They are the mother's advocate, helping the mother to achieve the experience she wants. Deputy Speaker, midwives are acknowledged to be a critical part of our health system, and they are highly valued for their care, compassion and expertise. This bill amends the Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme Act of 2010, specifically develops a framework for the Commonwealth Government to pay 100% of eligible claims for intrapartum care outside a hospital. Intrapartum refers to the time period from the onset of labour until the delivery of the placenta, the critical period where the child is born. A crucial time of care for both the mother and the child, and the midwife is there for it all, using their expertise to support the mother and literally guide the child into the world. The framework stipulates that the home births and intrapartum care outside of hospital must be conducted in accordance with the best practice guidelines, namely the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia's safety and quality guidelines for privately practising midwives. The bill includes 100% coverage for eligible entities which employ midwives for birthing on country, such as the Aboriginal Community-Controlled Health Organisations. For numerous reasons, including maternal and community wellbeing, it is vital to safeguard access to culturally safe birthing on country rights for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women. And this bill makes this possible. The legislation will come into effect on the 1st of July 2025 and will resolve the existing issues of gaps in coverage. It will also give the professional indemnity insurer ongoing certainty of the Commonwealth's responsibility for the costs pertaining to professional negligence claims. As the amazing Assistant Minister said, this bill is about empowering Australia's hardworking midwives, supporting women and mothers, and ensuring equitable access to continuous, culturally safe maternity care. It is a testament to our commitment to strengthening Australia's healthcare system. And it is that aspect that I'd like to touch on now, the Albanese Labor government's extensive measures to improve the Australian healthcare system, especially for women. This year, Women's Budget Statement highlighted the reality that girls and women experience gender bias in the health system. Unsurprisingly, this leads to poorer outcomes, such as delayed diagnoses and subsequent treatment and higher out-of-pocket costs. Girls and women may also be adversely affected by a lack of understanding and, unfortunately, sometimes even a stigma around women's health issues such as menstruation, miscarriage and menopause. This is just one of the reasons behind Working for Women, a strategy for gender equality, and the aims, and the government has committed to the aims of that report. These include not only the recognition of gendered health issues, but responsiveness to them with fewer barriers to information, diagnosis, treatment and services. And the strategy ties in with the bill we're discussing today, with the commitment to women having choice and access to safe and affordable maternal, sexual and reproductive health care. Deputy Speaker, this was the background to this year's budget announcement of nearly $50 million to not only enhance but revolutionise health services for women with complex gynaecological conditions. What this means is an additional 430,000 more services so affected women can receive longer consultations of 45 minutes or more. Medicare now pays the same fee to a gynaecologist for a long and complex consultation as it does for appointments for other specialities such as cardiology and gastroenterology. This directly addresses the structural inequality that girls and women have endured for years. At the same time, this year's budget provided over $58 million of funding to establish endometriosis and pelvic pain clinics across Australia. The clinics provide expert multidisciplinary care, enabling more appropriate and more timely diagnosis and management. Endometriosis is a debilitating chronic condition that affects 1 in 9 girls and women in Australia. These clinics are ensuring improved pain management for sufferers, as well as building an expert primary care workforce. We're also adding longer Medicare consultations for patients with suspected endometriosis and pelvic pain. Further measures announced in the budget included support for women who have suffered miscarriages and free period products via National Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisations, or the NACHOs. The budget also directed $57 million over 4 years from 24-25 to promote high quality and tailored maternity care. This applies to recommendations from the MBS Review Task Force for participating midwives. It increases the time for antenatal and postnatal consultations, more adequately reflecting the time that expert care actually takes, and then you set kids up for life. The funding covers the introduction of a 6-week checkup after birth to help identify any mental health issues and ensures the all-important continuity of care with midwives. Deputy Speaker, these wide-ranging reforms benefit girls and women in every community across Australia. The extension of the professional indemnity program for midwives working outside of hospital settings indicates Labor's commitment to women's health and women's choices. As the Minister said, the Albanese government recognises that midwifery continuity of care is incredibly important and has the best outcomes for women and babies, and we will continue to work to make sure that it is accessible and supported. This was another failure of the former government in healthcare, but as always, the Albanese government cleaned up the mess. Thank you to Jed Carney for the great work that you do in this area, and I commend the bill to the House.
The question is that this bill now be read a second time, and I call the member for Warringah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme Amendment Bill 2024. Sounds technical, but it is incredibly important to women in their birthing choices. Equitable access to midwifery services is an important step in ensuring Australia's maternal health care system meets the needs of expectant new mothers. This bill represents an important step forward, addressing critical gaps in care and providing necessary support to the vital work of midwives who are essential to achieving better outcomes for both mothers and babies. The current scheme provides indemnity coverage for antenatal and postnatal care but excludes intrapartum services provided by privately practising midwives outside of hospital settings. This bill closes that gap, ensuring that government will cover 100% of eligible claims for these services, no matter where the birth takes place. This change is a win for midwives and mothers alike, enhancing the safety and accessibility of birthing options across the country. I commend the Minister for her commitment to improving maternal care and listening to community concerns. The decision to remove the term low risk from this legislation is particularly significant. It ensures that all women, regardless of how their pregnancy or birth is classified, have access to the support they need. This change promotes equity, providing women with greater autonomy and choice in how and where they give birth, as well as recognising the role of midwifery care in all aspects of maternal health. Midwives play an invaluable role in supporting women throughout their pregnancy, childbirth and postpartum period. In fact, research from the Australian College of Midwives consistently shows that continuity of care with a known midwife improves the outcomes for mothers and babies, including reducing the need for then medical interventions. Midwives not only ensure safe and positive birthing experiences, but also provide vital postnatal care, including screenings for mental health concerns and domestic violence. They have that access to new mothers, and they are able to get to discuss any ongoing concerns and identify problems. Tragically, and it's quite an incredible statistic, suicide remains one of the leading causes of death of postnatal mothers, so it just makes that ability for midwives to do that continuity of care postpartum so incredibly important. So these services are critical for the well-being of new mothers. It puts midwives in that position and ability to identify and to discuss if there are concerns from a domestic violence point of view. We know statistically this is the time where women are often most at risk because that's been such a change to the relationship. And so it is vital for mothers to have access to that care. I also very much want to thank the Minister for her engagement on the issue. Earlier this year, Minister Carney visited Warringah to announce additional funding to support midwives in providing longer postnatal consultations. Again, that is really important because that longer consultation allows for that discussion and that addressing or identifying all of those risk factors around domestic violence or mental health of mothers. Those consultations allow time for comprehensive birth debriefings, mental health screenings, and these are so essential for early intervention. These were key changes that I'd advocated for, like many others, alongside the Australian College of Midwives, who have worked tirelessly to bring about these changes, and I commend them for their hard work. And this bill presents the next step in improving accessibility to midwives for young mothers. As we move forward, we must remain focused on addressing broader systemic challenges, though, particularly improving health outcomes for First Nations women. We know, unfortunately, the statistics are not good, and it is not an equitable access to healthcare. This bill will help provide greater access to birthing on country programs, which assist Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women to give birth in a more culturally safe way, surrounded by family and community. The research indicates that this is important. Birthing on country provides better mental health outcomes, strong connection to cultural heritage, and improved physical outcomes for mothers and babies. And again, those longer consultation times mean all those screening factors can be present all the more. In fact, Charles Darwin University's Indigenous Birthing in an Urban Setting study to help close the gap in Brisbane, found that birthing on country reduced First Nation preterm birth from 14.3% to 8.9%. So that is a significant improvement. So it shows the importance of creating and maintaining a maternal care system where women have greater choice, respect and support. Women must be at the centre of the system, and the absolute priority being greater options and choices in where birth can take place and how it can take place, and especially that it be culturally appropriate. So this bill brings us closer to achieving that vision. I commend the Minister for her leadership in this area.
I put the question that this bill be now read a second time. All those the opinion say aye. Contrary no. And I call the clerk.
Second reading. A bill for an act to amend the Midwife Professional Indemnity Commonwealth Contribution Scheme Act 2010 and for related purposes.
A message has been received from Her Excellency the Governor-General recommending, in accordance with Section 56 of the Constitution, an appropriation for the purposes of this bill. If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I'll put the question immediately. The question is that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. Aye. Go to the next. So I'll call the clerk. Sorry.
Government business. Next order of the day. Health Insurance Pathology Fees Repeal Bill 2024.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Durack.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Health Insurance Pathology Fees Repeal Bill 2024 removes the fees imposed on the pathology sector for certain categories of pathology applications. The bill responds to the findings of the 2022 Health Portfolio Charging Review by addressing the misalignment of fees charged under the Pathology Fees Act with the charging framework and providing fee relief and reducing administrative burden on the pathology sector. The bill will maintain a high level of confidence in the accuracy of Medicare eligible pathology services by continuing to require service providers to meet requisite accreditation and quality assurance standards. Importantly, the bill has the support of Australia's pathology sector, having been welcomed by the stakeholders such as the Royal College of Pathologists of Australasia, Australian Pathology and Public Pathology Australia. As such, the Coalition will support this bill. We understand the importance of providing fee relief to the pathology sector and providing assistance to health providers who are also dealing with Labor's cost of living crisis. Pathology is an important part of the health system, but as we all know from experience, you generally require a referral from a doctor to get a pathology test. That is why the Coalition, while supportive of this bill, is calling out the Albanese government for the fact that it has never been harder or more expensive to see a doctor than right now under Labor. Labor promised to strengthen Medicare, but it has only been weakened. Bulk billing has dropped 11% under the Albanese government to 77%, whilst out-of-pocket costs have increased by 11% just in the past year alone. To put this into perspective, when the Coalition left office, the bulk billing rate was 88%. When Peter Dutton, the Leader of the Opposition, was Health Minister, it was 84%. In fact, Medicare is currently covering the lowest percentage of GP fees on record. On average, Australians are being forced to cover 45% more of the cost to see a doctor, that's if you can see one, from their own pocket, in comparison to under the former Coalition government. Even more concerningly, the total number of GP visits declined by 2.4 million in the period 2023 to 2024 because Australians are having to make the difficult decision between paying the bills and seeing their doctor. This means people, quite simply, are getting sicker and ending up in our already overstretched hospitals. These figures make a mockery of Labor's claims regarding a proposed decade of cuts and neglect. The government is not providing the reform needed to ensure Australians have timely and affordable access to a doctor, which will in turn only put further pressure on Australia's struggling hospital system, as this primary care crisis pushes patients towards emergency departments. This is shameless. The Coalition has put forward our plan to incentivise more junior doctors to pursue a career as a general practitioner and safeguard Australians' healthcare access. The package will invest $400 million to provide junior doctors with direct financial incentive payments, assistance with leave entitlements and support for pre-vocational training. This will ensure junior doctors who pursue training as a GP in the community are not financially worse off compared to doctors who remain in the hospital environment. A strong pipeline of home-trained GP graduates is critical to deliver essential healthcare to all Australians. And might I say, as a regional and remote MP, nowhere is it more needed than in parts of Australia that I represent. It will help to ensure that Australians have more timely and affordable access to see their doctor so that they can access essential services like pathology tests. So, once again, the Coalition will support this bill to provide fee relief to the pathology sector. However, I will be moving an amendment to highlight this government's concerning record on Medicare. Thank you.
Please, with the member for Durack. Can I confirm with the member for Durack? Do you propose to move the amendment now or later?
If I might give way to the next speaker, and I will return to the lectern. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is that this bill now be read a second time. I call the member for Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Our health system's in crisis, and it's actually crumbling under the weight of government neglect. It's underfunded, it's under-resourced, and it's overworked. Around a decade ago, the then LNP government cut bulk billing payments for pathology and diagnostic imaging. Part of their infamous Medicare co-payment reforms, a widely unpopular policy from the then Health Minister, now the Leader of the Opposition, that forced families to pay more for essential care. And for 24 years, both Labor and Liberal have failed to index Medicare rebates for pathology. Rebates haven't increased since 1999, even as costs have absolutely skyrocketed. Pathology clinics are telling us they just can no longer afford to provide bulk billed tests at the current rebate rates. We've seen what happens when Medicare rebates fail to keep up with the cost of care. GP bulk billing rates have plummeted and patients are being forced to pay that price. Add the cost of living crisis and Australians simply cannot afford to see the doctor or the dentist or a mental health professional. We have a bill before us today making pathology cheaper, as it should be, because Medicare is broken in Australia. We don't have a universal healthcare system. Instead, we have thousands of Australians choosing between paying their rent or seeing a dentist or a psychologist. Almost 40% of young Australians experienced a mental disorder in this last year. Almost a quarter of people who need mental health support are delaying or just not seeing a psychologist due to the cost. 40% of Australians avoid the dentist because it just costs too much. That's hundreds and thousands of people suffering. The majority major parties, hundreds of thousands of people actually suffering. The major parties tell you that putting mental and dental health cover into Medicare costs just too much. They cry poor about funding the things that Australians need to be healthy, to actually live a good life. Miraculously, they have the funding to spend billions on fossil fuel subsidies and tax handouts to property developers. That's a rip-off. That's a rip-off. It shouldn't be this hard to make the health and well-being of Australians an absolute priority for Australia. Just bring mental and dental cover into Medicare, make it affordable and accessible for everyone. And the same will happen with pathology if the government continues to merely tinker around the edges of healthcare reform. The Labor government has promised some pathology items will be indexed, but it doesn't start for another year. A year too late. And the majority of the tests, including some of the most commonly provided ones, won't even be included. This bill goes a small way to relieving administration's costs. Really, the government should do more right now because accessible pathology tests are vital to the functioning of our healthcare system and to Australians' health. Thank you.
The question is that the bill now be read a second time. I call the member for Durack.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now that I have confirmed the procedure, I would like to seek leave to move a motion, move an amendment on the Health Insurance Pathology Fees Repeal Bill 2024.
Is leave granted? I thank the member for Durack. So the question is, does the bill now be read a second time? All those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The clerk.
Second reading. A bill for an act to repeal the Health Insurance Pathology Fees Act 1991 and for related purposes.
Right, if no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I will put the report question immediately. The question is that this bill now be reported to the House without amendment. All those opinions say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. For the clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 1. Resumption of the debate on the question that grievance has been noted.
The question is that grievances be noted. I call the member for Curtin.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Australians know we face a growing housing affordability crisis. Young Australians are struggling to afford to buy or rent a home, and homeowners can see how hard it is or will be for their kids and grandkids. At our housing forums in my electorate of Curtin, people said they want politicians and governments to stop the political point scoring and work together towards affordable and accessible housing. They said houses are homes, not just investment products. It's taken 20 years of policy from both sides of politics to get where we are. Housing is now half as affordable as it was when compared to wages. There's no silver bullet to solve this problem. It won't be quick or easy, but it can be achieved if we have the wisdom and the will. In Curtin, our 173,000 residents live in 76,000 homes across our 28 suburbs. We have about 7,000 vacant homes, 29,000 homes with more than 2 spare bedrooms, 2,000 social housing homes and 1,700 homes used for short stay accommodation. About a third of our homes are owned outright, a third mortgaged and a third rented. My electorate of Curtin has substantially higher median house prices and rents in the Perth metro area. While some households are on high incomes and are able to afford these prices, younger households and essential workers are struggling to live close to their families, friends and workplaces. So what are governments doing now about housing affordability? Both major parties have found that it's politically advantageous for house prices to increase because 2/3 of households own their home. Successive governments have served the interests of these owners, and we now have a growing gap between homeowners and people who can't get on the property ladder. Current government strategies and policies to improve housing affordability are timid and slow. The Housing Accord, announced in October 22, has not been fully implemented, and we're not on track to meet the targets for home building. Direct government-funded home building under the Accord is limited. There are 10,000 affordable homes to be built by state and territory governments. The WA allocation of this is just over 1,000 new houses. If this was distributed equally across WA, which is unlikely, that would only be 70 houses in Curtin.
The WA state government has seized most planning authority from local governments in an attempt to drive more infill, but many communities are justifiably concerned about massive apartment blocks towering over quiet neighbourhoods. So which policies work? Effective housing policies can address two issues: how many homes are available and who gets them. Right now, we need to increase supply of available housing, but we should also try to make housing policy fairer. I would like to outline 13 policies that I think are most worth pursuing, 7 that increase supply and 6 that make housing fairer. With some strong political will, we can make substantial inroads in improving housing affordability both now and for future generations. Firstly, 7 policies to increase housing supply. 1, we need more infill, done in a sustainable way that builds communities we want to live in. This depends on consulting deeply with communities so they're involved in the process. 2, we need to boost government investment in social and affordable housing builds. Social housing builds have not kept pace with demand. In WA, there's currently an unmet need of more than 39,000 social homes. The current commitment under the Housing Accord would only equate to 1,000 new social housing builds in WA. 3, we need to attract more workers to the housing construction sector. Construction trades should be prioritised in immigration because strong employment conditions make it hard to expand the domestic construction workforce. Slowing down infrastructure spend would also reduce competition for the skilled workers we need to build houses. 4, we need to encourage smaller homes to better match population needs. The average house in Curtin has 3 bedrooms, but the number of single-person households is now 19,000 and growing. This trend will increase as the population ages. Smaller homes provide downsizing options and are more sustainable and more manageable if you live alone. 5, we need to encourage better use of vacant homes. There are more than 7,000 vacant homes in Curtin, and some of these could add to housing supply quickly. This could be achieved through vacant property rates or taxes or lower transaction costs. 6, we should replace stamp duty with a broad-based land tax. Economists recognise that stamp duty is an inefficient tax because it discourages households from moving to more appropriate homes when their circumstances change. While this is a state government responsibility, the federal government could assist in the longer-term transition to a land tax. 7, we need to reduce home building costs through increasing construction industry productivity. Australian home building costs are high, partly due to construction sector productivity in Australia not improving in the past 30 years, partially driven by restrictive work practices and the failure to innovate. Industry and government should be looking for reforms to improve growth and speed up build times. Next, we need to consider further reforms to make housing fairer. Here are 6 ideas worth pursuing. 1, we could create a level playing field for home buyers by reforming negative gearing and the CGT discount. Reforming negative gearing and capital gains tax discount could change the mix between owners and renters. At current affordability levels, 2/3 of young people now despair that they will never own a home. Modelling shows tax changes could shift between 2.5% and 5% of Australians from renting to owning, as renters would be bidding against fewer investors at auctions. 2, we need to provide improved security of tenure to renters. More Australians are likely to rent for life and need secure tenure. Banning no grounds evictions and limiting rent increases for existing tenants in line with local market changes would help. In Curtin, this would have particular impact in Scarborough, Subiaco and Wembley, which have the highest number of renting households. 3, we should encourage institutional investment in build-to-rent. The build-to-rent bill has been stuck in the Senate, only passing this week. I visited Sentinel's build-to-rent project in Subiaco a few weeks ago and saw what can be achieved if we attract foreign capital into stable, high-quality, long-term rental product. 4, we should increase the rate of Commonwealth rent assistance. Despite some increases in recent budgets, the rate of CRA has not kept pace with recent rental price increases. CRA should be increased for those in the greatest need while reforming the eligibility rules and improving targeting. 5, we should reinstate the National Rental Affordability Scheme. NRAS was a jointly funded scheme between state and federal governments, but it's coming to an end. It was a good policy, but was burdened by administration problems that could be overcome. 6, we could encourage renting out spare bedrooms. There are more than 12 million spare bedrooms Australia-wide and 29,000 homes in Curtin with 2 or more spare bedrooms, including 2,800 in Scarborough alone. Reviewing tax settings on renting out bedrooms and simplifying administrative arrangements could boost housing supply quickly. So which policies don't work? Well, many policies put in place in the past or proposed for the future do not meaningfully improve housing affordability and in some cases actually make it worse. Or they have other consequences that create additional problems. This includes first homeowner grants, dipping into superannuation, rent freezes, regulating short-term rentals in most areas, wholesale cuts to immigration or freezing building standards. Some of these, like homeowner grants and dipping into superannuation, just put more money into the system, driving prices up. These policies are politically cynical and economically irresponsible. Others, like rent freezes, may reduce supply of rental housing. Cutting immigration has significant implications for our broader economy, and freezing building standards would create homes that are more expensive to run for the coming decades if they're not energy efficient. We need to act now. Many of the changes that I've outlined for consideration will take time to have an impact on housing affordability, but we need to get started. Implementing these reforms will require cooperation between different sides of politics and also between different levels of government. This will only be possible if political parties can put their differences aside and agree that long-term outcomes for the future of the country are more important than scoring political points. As an independent, I'm open to ideas no matter where they come from. Right now, we need all the good ideas. Next week, I'll be hosting a housing workshop to test these ideas with my constituents as the next step in developing our Curtin housing policy paper. With some political will, we can work across politics and across different levels of government to fix this problem so young people and all Australians can aspire to secure and appropriate housing.
The question is that grievances be noted. I call the member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. The 5th of December is International Volunteer Day, and I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about volunteers in my wonderful community in Chisholm. We've recently held the Caroline Chisholm Volunteer Awards ceremony, and the ceremony is one of my favourite events of the year. It was such a privilege to be able to recognise volunteers from organisations from right across my beautiful electorate, spend time together at the fabulous Box Hill Community Arts Centre and sharing some terrific conversations, connection and refreshments. These awards are really important in our community. There's absolutely no question that the work that holds communities together is so often undertaken by volunteers, and simply things fall apart without them. I think it is absolutely the right thing to do to recognise their contributions, achievements, and highlight the importance of volunteering right across the electorate, and know that it will inspire others to also make a contribution and become a volunteer. The Caroline Chisholm Awards continue a tradition started by the incredible former member for Chisholm and former Speaker of the House of Representatives, my friend Anna Burke. It has been terrific to follow her example of service to our fabulous community. It's been such an honour and privilege, and I've learnt so much from her. Caroline Chisholm, for whom my seat was named, was of course one of Australia's most famous volunteers and community activists, working hard particularly to help the cause of migrants, women and girls throughout the 19th century. So I think that this adds an additional layer of significance to the recognition of volunteers in my community. I was recently able to highlight the work of volunteers at the White Horse State Emergency Service, one of our terrific local SES teams. This is a really, really busy team working hard, and I was just so pleased to learn more about everything they contribute to our community when I recently visited with Emergency Services Minister and Minister for Cities, Jenny McAllister. The Minister and I really do understand the hard work that needs to be supported, and will work with our state and local government counterparts to emphasise the support that is needed. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the White Horse SES for everything they do in our community. I'm delighted that the latest round of volunteer grants has opened and that eligible local groups will be able to submit expressions of interest. Volunteer grants recognise the incredibly valuable role of volunteers and the role that they play in building more resilient and cohesive communities. Grants of between $1,000 and $5,000 are available to help community organisations to support the vital work of their volunteers. This year, some changes have been made to the volunteer grants program to better respond to the environment volunteer organisations are now faced with and to better reflect our government's commitment to children and young people. There are now 2 categories for volunteer grants which reflect areas of high demand for volunteer organisations. Category 1 for communications and IT items, things like laptops, phones, payment devices and software, and paying for insurance premiums. And Category 2 for items and services that support the development and well-being of children and young people under 18. These changes mean volunteer grant funding will be more targeted to where it is needed most. The volunteer grants will fund volunteer organisations for costs associated with any activity helping and supporting children and young people under 18, to help with the costs of modernising their operations and to cover key costs including insurance premiums and internet bills. I am so pleased and so privileged to be able to support the incredible work of the amazing volunteers and organisations in my electorate. And I want to thank everyone for all they do contributing to our beautiful, vibrant community, and to wish everyone a very happy International Volunteers Day on the 5th of December. Thank you. I remember when I first became the candidate for Chisholm and how frequently when I was out door knocking the issue of higher education came up in conversation. In many ways this was no surprise. People in my electorate really do value education and understand that it opens the doors of opportunity. And with 2 universities, Monash University and Deakin University, in the local area, there are many students, graduates, academics and their families who call my beautiful electorate home. I have been so pleased to be part of a government that champions education, and particularly higher education, and I will always be a champion for higher education myself. I spoke about this in my first speech and about my view that we needed to reform the sector so more people had the opportunity to obtain an education, and that the often anti-education, anti-university ideologies of the previous government needed to be rejected. Our government is leading an historic reform process of the university sector, and the Australian Universities Accord has provided a really important blueprint for ways forward to ensure that the sector is sustainable, accessible and excellent, providing high-quality education right across the country. I undertook a survey in my electorate a while ago now on this issue and received hundreds and hundreds of responses. And this informed a submission that I then wrote and submitted on my community's behalf about the reform they wanted to see in the sector. Reducing debt, supporting students with pathways and improving safety on campus were a few of the hot topics that emerged, and these are just a few of the areas we are taking action on. We have changed the way debt is calculated, and that means over 23,000 people in my electorate will never see their debts grow faster than their wages again. We are investing in opportunities so more young people can get to university. We are introducing paid placements too for eligible students, which I know is incredibly important to people in Chisholm. And we have established a National Student Ombudsman to provide an important pathway for complaints to be handled and resolved, and provide an extra layer of accountability and process for students who might want to flag issues outside of their university processes. We're also working through our national plan to eliminate gendered violence in a generation. This is something that touches every portfolio in our government, and education is a really critical part of the delivery of this plan. These issues around higher education are all really near and dear to me and to my community. If I have the privilege to return here following the next election as a member of a Labor government, then we will wipe even more debt for people and continue to implement the really important reforms that we've started to strengthen our higher education system in Australia. I will always be a fierce champion for higher education and for my community, and I am looking forward to doing more work in this area and beyond with the government and in Chisholm. Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that grievances be noted. I call the member for Riverina.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. And last night, Wagga Wagga City Council has put forward a motion which was passed unanimously, saying that the federal government should nationalise REX. Now, I've said from the outside of REX's financial difficulties, and it went into voluntary administration at the end of July, that all options need to be on the table. And I've raised the possibility of the federal government having an equity stake in REX to ensure the airline's future. That said, the federal government is not usually in the business of owning airlines, as important as that might be for many people. What the crucial aspect of REX's turbulence at the moment is the fact that they are the only ones who service many country towns. And so for those country towns, if not for REX, they would not be able to get planes into their airports, and therefore they wouldn't be able to get doctors and nurses and vaccines and medication, most importantly. Also, people in those towns would not be then able to make their capital city medical appointments. And it's more than just health, and we all know that. It's business, it's tourism, it's so many aspects of modern living is why regional people need, expect, demand and deserve to have air services. And certainly for Wagga Wagga, we are the benefits of not only having REX, but also obviously QantasLink, as are many other regional places. And if REX is not flying, then that just leaves it open to QantasLink being the only airline, and therefore prices go up. There is no competition, and that would be of huge disadvantage for people who call the regions home. And I know when I was the Deputy Prime Minister and we had the global pandemic, I was proud of the assistance that I provided not only to REX Airlines, but every airline in Australia. And certainly in REX's case, it was around $60 million of support, because I knew that planes in the air meant jobs on the ground. And Labor often criticised me and yelled across the chamber during question time, "You're the Minister for REX." Well, I took that as a badge of honour, because in the rest of the world, there were 26 airlines, national carriers, large airlines, of the size of, say, Virgin, that went bankrupt during COVID-19. Went bankrupt. They're no longer operating. They're no longer flying. And I well remember talking about aviation to somebody who would know, and that is Warren Truss, the former member for Wide Bay, the former Transport Minister, former Deputy Prime Minister, former Nationals leader. And Warren told me what a volatile industry aviation is. And he was right, like that and everything else that Warren ever set his mind to. One of the finest ministers I've ever seen, somebody who read every single line of every single piece of legislation that was ever put before him. And he knew and he understood aviation. And I will say, and this might come as a surprise to those opposite, but so too does the Prime Minister, current Prime Minister, member for Grayndler. And I can well remember taking him into my confidence when I wanted to discuss with him matters of aviation importance, and on a confidential basis we talked about what the then opposition might agree to and what they might disagree about on matters of aviation and transport generally. And they were good meetings, and they were successful meetings, and I respect his view, just like I respect he is at the moment and hopefully will in the future do the right thing by REX. And I know the government is underwriting the tickets. I know they're underwriting the routes. I know they're underwriting regional express services for regional people, and the government must continue to do this whilst Ernst Young works through the process with potential buyers. It's a difficult process. I understand that. Getting a buyer for an airline that is experiencing tough times is hard. Wagga Wagga needs Rex. We've got the maintenance hangar at the Wagga Wagga Airport. Those operations just in Wagga Wagga alone employs around 170, 180 people. That contributes $12 million to the local economy. And it's too big an airline to fail. It was a folly, in hindsight, of course, that Rex took on the capital city to capital city routes. And the Sydney to Melbourne air route is one of the busiest in the world. And to take on Virgin and Qantas on that route, in hindsight, was a mistake. Rex was making reasonable money in the black year after year. That won many international awards for being the regional airline of choice, a regional airline that Australia obviously was very proud of, but a globally recognised airline. And I would urge and encourage any country commuter who is flying, if they have a choice, to fly Rex, because if you don't use something, often you lose something, and we simply cannot afford to lose Rex. So it's involuntary administration. I appreciate the government is doing what it needs to at the moment. I would implore the government, through the Prime Minister, who, as I said, understands aviation, through the Transport Minister, to do all it can to keep Rex planes in the air, because it's too important not to. Now, Wagga Wagga City Council's letter will obviously be landing on the Prime Minister, if not the Transport Minister's desk, if not both, and I will certainly be following that up as well. So I commend Council for taking an interest in this matter. Rest assured I've been on the case, and I will continue to do just that. This is a grievance debate. Grievances are obviously issues of concern, and I am concerned very much about the parlous state of regional Australia at the moment under this government. And you only have to ask any irrigation farmer. I appreciate I have the member for Nichols behind me, and I'm sure he would appreciate better than most how difficult it is for our farmers who grow the food and fibre that feeds our nation and many others besides, that puts the clothes on people's backs, just how difficult it is for those farmers under this Labor government, because they're in there buying water, distorting the water market. We need that water flowing down those irrigation channels to ensure that our farmers can be the best they are in the world. I think our farmers sometimes get a bad rap. I think our farmers are sometimes not seen as the great environmental stewards that they are. Our farmers are the best environmentalists in the world. Make no mistake about that. They are the best, and we should thank our farmers every time we tuck our knees under the table to eat. 3 times a day, every day. Breakfast, lunch and dinner. We should be saying to our farmers, thank you for the job that you do. Often, at the vagaries of the weather, they work for 12 months and earn absolutely nothing. And they need a better government. They do. And hopefully after the next election they will have a better government who will treat their needs far more diligently and carefully, with far more considered action than this Labor government. But what I would really hate to see, and what would be a real grievance for me, because I'll always say that the very worst Labor member is going to always be better than the very best Greens political party member. Always, always. And I'm sure I will have a chorus of support about that. And what I really don't want to see, is a Labor, Greens, Albanese, Bant alliance after the next election. And it just does my head in, because we saw just yesterday the all too cosy relationship between the Greens political party and Labor. And the Greens have caved in on the housing at what was the sort of cosy little deal, the little arrangement they may have made that we'll find out. But the Greens stand for upsetting the rhythm of the traditions of this nation, turning society on its head. That's what the Greens stand for. If they were just an environmental party, well, all well and good, but they're not. They want to change Australia. They want to rip down the flag. They want to end Australia Day. They want to ban horse racing. They stand for everything that the Nationals do not stand for. And I tell you what, if Labor has this cosy relationship after the next election with them, God help Australia.
The question is that grievances be noted. I call the member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. There has been significant discourse around the issue of gambling harm over the last few months, an issue which I am naturally invested in as the member for Dunkley, former community sector worker and as a mother. But I might also touch upon the broad issue of harmful addiction, which remains stubbornly present in our communities, particularly in my community. Addiction is defined as being the state of being addicted to some habit, practice or substance. Substance and gambling addiction are a scourge on many families in my electorate, while addiction to social media is on the rise, particularly amongst our young people. Having worked in the community sector for over 35 years, I've witnessed the impact of addiction to alcohol, drugs, gambling, online use, social media, cigarettes and now vaping. I see the impact on people's lives as I wander through Frankston, particularly around the station. It is a stark reality. These addictions lead to poverty and homelessness, mental health issues, loneliness and isolation, and increasingly suicide. I should note that there are many fantastic organisations in my community doing excellent work to help people through these issues. These include Headspace, the Frankston and Mornington Peninsula Drug and Alcohol Task Force, Windana, Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. Thank you for the incredible work you do as workers and organisations to support people in our community. My predecessor, the late and remarkable Peter Murphy, set out to investigate with colleagues the scourge of online gambling addiction along with many of my parliamentarian colleagues. This ultimately led to the You Win Some, You Lose More report, which was finalised in June 2023. The report provides 31 recommendations that apply a public health lens to online gambling to reduce harms to Australians. The government has implemented a range of strategies to date, and we are now patiently waiting on the finalisation of the recommendations after some significant consultation by the Minister on what will be implemented in the future. The measures already put in place to reduce gambling harms include launching BetStop, the National Self-Exclusion Register, mandating customer ID pre-verification for all new online wagering accounts, banning the use of credit cards for online wagering, introducing mandatory minimum classifications for online gambling, replacing the ineffective gamble responsibly message on wagering advertising with new evidence-based taglines, introducing nationally consistent staff training, and requiring online wagering companies to send their customers monthly activity statements. We have a great sports culture in this country, and my view is that online sports gambling does not make sport any better to watch. We must and should do better to protect people from the harms of online gambling, our adults and children from accessing gambling apps online. As you might expect as the member for Dunkley, I get many constituents contacting me, encouraging me to finish the work Peter started on the You Win Some, You Lose More report. This includes Caroline, a local resident from Dunkley, who continues to provide me with updates on why we need to reduce gambling harm. She knows full well the impact of gambling after being incarcerated, partially due to her own addiction to gambling. Caroline has been a fierce advocate, reaching out to ACMA to request a reduction in gambling advertising. She has asked me repeatedly to consider addressing this important issue for the sake of our children who are blasted by gambling incentives on the television and social media. nationally, Australians lose $25 billion to gambling each year. The majority of this is on pokies. Now, whilst this isn't online gambling, the real issue with online gambling lies in the fact that so many young people are engaging in it, which leads to a cycle of gambling later in life. As Peter said at the time, simulated gambling through video games is grooming children and young people to gamble and encourages risky behaviour. The torrent of advertising in it is inescapable. It is manipulating an impressionable and vulnerable audience to gamble online. The Albanese government has been acting to address the recommendations in the report. I am aware that significant consultation has been undertaken as part of the process developing the strategies that will be given forward. And these strategies go glove in hand with the work to place an age cap on social media, which is supported by the member for Flinders. In my time here, I have advocated for the adoption of the 31 recommendations included in the report. I hope sooner rather than later these recommendations will be implemented. We need safety mechanisms implemented to keep individuals and families safe now more than ever. Throughout my career in the community sector, I've witnessed firsthand the impact of addiction, working with adults and young people, watching families grapple with substance abuse and alcoholism. I have committed to work to address other harms that result in addiction, and as the member of the Committee on Health, Aged Care and Sport, I'm engaged in the inquiry on the impact of alcohol and drugs. I'm looking forward to being involved in this in depth and the recommendations we develop thanks to the inquiry. Social media, like gambling and alcohol and drug abuse, is an addiction. Although obviously not on the same scale as gambling and alcohol addiction, it's still addictive. You only have to walk around the community to see how addicted to devices we are. Social media harm for young people is a seriously pressing issue that this government is acting to resolve with a ban on social media for young people under 16. Social media has many negative side effects: lack of self-esteem, constant anxiety of missing out by not getting enough likes, eating disorders and bullying, and in severe cases, sextortion. The effect of online sextortion is unfortunately something my community has had to deal with the passing of Mac Holdsworth, son of Dunkley legend Wayne Holdsworth, who was CEO of Frankston District Basketball Association. Mac took his own life following attempts to blackmail him online with sexually explicit photos. In his son's honour, Wayne established the organisation Smack Talk. And there are many other devastating stories to be told about the impact of social media. The story of Charlotte, more recently, who was bullied and then took her life, is one such story. Parents and young people have come to me with various views about the introduction of this legislation, some agreeing with it, others not. As a mum of a teenager, this has been an issue that we have discussed as a family, the benefits and the pitfalls. Wayne Holdsworth has been a key driver of a public campaign on the harms of social media and the need to disconnect. I am pleased the opposition have committed to support the bill and work to pass this legislation. Our role as MPs is to advocate and lead the development and adoption of legislation that ensures the best interests of Australia and its people. My role is to provide facts, what we're doing and why. I am committed to working to addressing addiction in its various forms so that families in Dunkley do not have to deal with increasing rates of poor mental health, anxiety, depression, loneliness and isolation, and in some cases, suicide. I have and will continue to work to understand, research and address these issues that create harm for children, young people and adults. That is my responsibility as the federal member for Dunkley. I will be a strong local voice for Dunkley on these issues, on gambling reform, social media reform, continuing to listen, consult on the mechanics of the legislation to ensure that what is delivered is informed by lived experience and makes a positive difference in the lives of those in my community and further afield.
The question is that grievances be noted. I call the member for Forrest.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The ABC plays an important role in many of our regional and remote communities, particularly in thin regional communication markets and during emergencies. Many years ago, I was proud to be selected as an ABC Rural Woman of the Year. Well, I'm actually not proud of the ABC anymore, Deputy Speaker. I'm appalled and disgusted. The ABC has become openly green left, politically biased and too often totally inaccurate, representing by majority city-centric elite activists in its news and current affairs delivery. And it's no wonder, because the majority of the ABC staff are located in cities. The 2022-23-24 annual report shows that 4,520 staff are based in metro areas and only 594 are in regional and remote areas. Now, no wonder we've seen the direct attacks on rural and regional farmers in the city-centric ABC, how it reported on the live cattle and live sheep issues, reported in such a way that the then Labor government firstly shut down the live cattle trade and has followed up with shutting down the live sheep trade. In each case, in the initial reporting, the ABC told only one side of the story. And what appalling attacks on our farmers and our regional communities as a result. I believe and hope that some of our regional ABC journalists actually understood the damage that's been done. I have watched the bias and politicisation of City ABC news and current affairs for years, and it's progressively got worse. I will never forget some years ago when we were in government, when in 2016 I read a terribly inaccurate ABC story about the sexual assault of a child in Nauru that proved to be completely false. And the list goes on and on. I kept a file of those for so many years. But the final straw has come for me as a result of the ABC's sustained attacks on our Australian Defence Forces over the last few years, culminating in the deliberate and calculated falsifying of video footage, which was literally doctored footage inserted by the ABC into a story that was clearly designed to provide live evidence to validate the journalist's story. By adding the extra gunshots to this combat footage, the ABC was determined to provide evidence that members of the 2nd Australian Commando Regiment in a helicopter fired multiple shots at what the ABC claimed were unarmed Afghan civilians. There is no doubt the ABC has been determined to vilify the Australian Defence Force members for years, desperately trying to prove they were guilty of war crimes. In spite of the weasel words we heard at Senate estimates and a pathetic and carefully orchestrated internal review that in no way passes the pub test of any fair-minded Australian, there is no doubt in anyone's mind that the ABC journalist and his team did indeed deliberately doctor, falsify, manipulate and distort information, material and evidence in order to mislead audiences, which was designed to substantiate that journalist storyline, that the ADF was guilty of and had committed a war crime. And yes, ABC, in quoting your own carefully selected internal reviewer, Mr Sunderland's own words, if the gunshots had been added with the deliberate purpose of misleading the audience, it would have amounted to one of the most egregious and serious breaches imaginable of fundamental journalist ethics. But this is exactly what the ABC did. It was, in fact, one of the most egregious and serious breaches imaginable of fundamental journalist ethics. Otherwise, the shots would not have been heard in the audio at all, and if it had been an error, the ABC would have corrected that fact immediately. The ABC cannot deny this. The evidence is clear. Further proof beyond doubt that the ABC has not and will not meet its charter obligations. Charter obligations which state the ABC has to provide comprehensive broadcasting services of a high standard, and the duties of the board includes to ensure that the gathering and presentation by the Corporation of News and Information is accurate and impartial according to the recognised standards of objective journalism. Well, it's obvious that the ABC is neither accurate and definitely not impartial. I am sickened by the fact that the ABC board and employees will all be probably smiling at how well they delivered this story that they wanted the public to believe. And in spite of how deliberately egregious and wrong that story was, no one has been held or will be held responsible or accountable. The board and the management and staff will carry on business as usual and nothing will change at the ABC. I mean, this is just further evidence of the Green Left ABC and that it is a law unto itself. But what is even worse, according to the 2024 ABC annual report, Australian taxpayers are paying a record amount of over $1.1 billion for this. And I understand the ABC is asking for even more taxpayers' dollars, at a time when I've read that its audience numbers are dwindling by 670,000 a week. No wonders the audience numbers are falling with stories like this. You know, this is a bit like shooting fish in a barrel when you attack our Defence Force members. And the ABC is determined not to represent broad Australian interests or views. There is a very clear lack of impartiality and balance, and there appears to be a consistent narrative for the Green Left ABC to criticise defence. Editorial standards at the ABC require accuracy, impartiality, excellence and independence. The ABC has failed this test, as we've seen with this story, not only in the audio editing I've talked about already, but I've seen it recently in the defence industry coverage, recent defence industry coverage, where the reporting showed a clear lack of balanced sources of information by those clearly with known agendas who are keen to disrupt defence, or to actually demonstrate any of the, not to demonstrate any of the great achievements of the ADF, the other side of that story. Information the Australian people have a right to and deserve to know from a media organisation they pay for. Coverage which would give our serving ADF members pride in their achievements and would actually help the ABC meet its editorial standard of broadcasting programs that contribute to a sense of national identity. The lack of balance was clear in the ABC's Land Forces Expo protest coverage. ABC News coverage was reported as people injured in the Land Forces Expo's protest this week are assessing their legal options, lawyer says. Well, there was little or no criticism of the violent protesters, and where was the reporting on the attendees who were either attacked or had to seek alternate routes? Why was there no reporting of the fact that the ADF personnel were advised to not attend the workplace on St Kilda Road for fear of attack? Why was there no reporting that ADF personnel were strongly advised not to wear their uniforms to work in that area for fear of attack? Little reporting of the fact that ADF personnel were harassed at hotels. The ABC article actually sought greater legal defence mechanisms, promoting greater protection for the protesters who are violent. One side of that story only. I am sick of these attacks on defence. This lack of balanced reporting and the ABC's ongoing sustained attack on our ADF has to have a really dramatic and dreadful impact at a time when retention is a problem, recruitment is a problem, and the finding of the Royal Commission into veteran suicide. The ABC editorial standard states that it should be broadcasting programs, as I said, that contribute to a sense of national identity. How is tearing at our ADF adding to our sense of national identity? It actually undermines Australia's values, freedoms and democracy. So that's in spite of our young people who are in significant and impressive numbers participating at events such as Anzac Day. It's no wonder the ABC is losing its audiences, because it is not providing those comprehensive broadcasting standards and services of a very high standard. And in presenting the editorial by the board and the duties of the board to ensure that the gathering and presentation by the corporation of news and information accurate, impartial, according to the recognised standards of objective journalism. Now, I can't believe that this is what we're getting from what is supposed to be our national ABC. As someone who lives and works in regional Australia, For so long we relied on the ABC to be exactly that, and to provide those of us in the regions not only with accurate reporting but with timely responses that we need whenever there is an emergency. I am so saddened at what the ABC has become.
The question is that grievances be noted. I call the member for Spence.
Well, thank you, Speaker. In my first speech in this place as the member for Spence, back on the 1st of August 2022, I said the following words which still ring true for me today. Strengthening our communities is the Australian way. It is on these terms that I am guided in my efforts to best represent the constituents of Spence. Because for our local community across the northern suburbs of Adelaide, which has within it some of the most disadvantaged areas in metropolitan Australia, people on the ground must be the front and centre of its representatives' priorities. And with that ethos in mind, we have some incredible outcomes under the Albanese Labor government since I was elected, with local voices helped come to fruition. That's why I'm going to take the time to call attention by calling attention to positive change we've seen under the Labor government in this term. The Albanese Labor government's #1 priority is fighting the cost of living. We know that families across the country are doing it tough, and I know that things are especially hard in my electorate of Spence. The northern suburbs of Adelaide is already disadvantaged, and this is not news to any residents that are watching. I also know that instead of seeing a guy in a suit talk about your conditions, you want a government that makes them better, and rightly so. The federal Labor government hears you, and we're taking action to do just that. We've delivered a bigger, better and fairer tax cut for 91% of taxpayers in my electorate, compared to the Liberal alternative. That is 67,000 people in Gawler, Elizabeth, Salisbury and everywhere in between, who will earn on average $1,217 more every year because of this change. Chances are, if you noticed your pay getting bigger since July this year, it's because of these changes. And we aren't stopping there either, because more needs to be done. We're making housing more affordable for both buyers and renters through our Help to Buy and Build to Rent reforms. That's providing significant financial support for 40,000 Australian families who are low or middle income earners to own their own home, as well as taking pressure off the rental market by boosting affordable housing as part of our efforts to increase supply and drive down prices. We've also delivered $300 off energy bill relief for every single household in this country. We've boosted Commonwealth rent assistance by 40% since 2022. We've increased the low-income Medicare threshold last year to ensure over 1 million low-income earners either remain exempt from the Medicare levy or pay a reduced rate. We've overseen a $54.90 a fortnight increase to the job seeker payment. And we've delivered a third consecutive pay rise for 2.6 million Australian workers. All the while, we've managed to put a lid on inflation, reducing by over half its previous peak since coming to government. Labor is delivering outcomes through policy influenced by your experience on the ground. But we know as a government that this work isn't done. I know as your local member for Spence that many families in the north are still living week to week, still struggling with their bills, still struggling to buy groceries. That's why we're committed to policies that bring your costs down. That's why we're delivering positive changes that directly affect your livelihoods, as I've mentioned. And I will never stop advocating to do that, because the cost of living is Labor's #1 priority. The Albanese Labor government is continuing to deliver local projects across the northern suburbs of Adelaide. This comes back to something I mentioned in my maiden speech, that strengthening communities is the Australian way. A Labor government is one that embraces the Australian way by ensuring where we live continues to grow and remains up to scratch, so that everyday Australian families can thrive in their communities. We've done that in the city of Playford, funding a plethora of local projects in the suburbs of Elizabeth, Munapara, Smithfield, Andrews Farm, Davron Park, Anglevale and more. These have included contributing over $1 million to upgrade and maintain sporting facilities in Clara Reserve in Davron Park, as well as providing funding for works on the Mandeville and Wilson Goodman reserves, in Davron Park and Elizabeth South respectively. And that's come alongside nearly $10 million in federal government has provided to the City of Playford to fix and upgrade roads across our community since Labor was elected. With a multitude of projects either underway or completed, this funding includes over $5 million provided for the Stebben Heath Road upgrade, alongside the $1.2 million contribution to fund a brand new roundabout at the intersection of Dalkeith and Stebben Heath Roads, as well as a complete overhaul of Kincaid Road in Elizabeth East, with an $800,000 contribution from the federal Labor government. And last but not least, a $15 million contribution for a dual lane roundabout at the intersection of Curtis and Heaslip Road, fixing what the RAAA called SA's riskiest intersection. We've also contributed over $3 million to fund infrastructure in Salisbury, with the federal government covering the total cost of upgrades for the Burton Community Hub, 1225 in Salisbury, and the improvements to Church and John Street, as well as funding a $1.5 million upgrade to the Salisbury Recreation Precinct on Happy Home Drive, and providing funds for the planned pedestrian crossing for the Salisbury North Primary School, which is due to be completed next year. Finally, let's talk about the town of Gawler. I'm so proud that the federal government has provided $400,000 to upgrade Dead Man's Pass and ensure this incredible amenity is safe for residents to enjoy. We have also provided over $1 million in funding to upgrade and maintain multiple roads in Cudler, Gawler South and Reed, alongside over $300,000 to construct playgrounds on Greenslade Boulevard, Colton Road and Julian Terrace. And across all the areas of the electorate I've mentioned, I'm just scratching the surface. We have provided tens of millions of dollars through roads to recovery funding, which you can see in action across our community as roads are maintained and improved. Our commitment to our community is matched by our actions, and the Albanese Labor government has no intention of taking its foot off the pedal. The Albanese Labor government believes in education. We believe in it because education is the master key to opportunity for Australians. It is the open door for people to create fulfilling lives individually, to thrive with their loved ones as a family, and to build the community around them. But that key only works if all Australians can access it. That door slams shut if Aussies can't get to university, if they can't afford to access TAFE. And without that master key, our community sees existing disadvantage get worse. We see cycles of poverty continue, which would otherwise be broken. But that is a priority of our government, to be that circuit breaker and to lift disadvantaged Australians from communities like the North, from suburbs like Elizabeth, Salisbury and Gawler, into places of learning so they can thrive. This is something I have fought incredibly hard to achieve over the course of my term, and I'm proud to say that this is what the Albanese Labor government is delivering. If you're a current university student, I have some incredible news. You are going to have a brand new suburban university study hub located right in the middle of Elizabeth in the existing TAFE precinct in 2025. This is going to slash your travel costs by bringing uni to your doorstep. This is going to turn your commute from a round trip of hours into a trip of minutes. And this is going to help link you to the incredible opportunities to be had at TAFE, should you choose to pursue them, and vice versa for TAFE students. This is a massive outcome for our community, which currently has no university presence on this scale north of Mawson Lakes. And it is an outcome the Albanese Labor government has delivered. The good news continues for TAFE too, because the Labor government will make 100,000 fee-free TAFE a permanent feature of our education system, building on what has made TAFE more affordable and more accessible for over 500,000 Aussies. Furthermore, if you've already completed your study, we're levelling the playing field for you as well. We're reducing existing student debts by 20% if re-elected next year. We're changing the system so you're only paying your debts off when you earn enough to afford it. And we've reversed the massive indexation on your student debt, which you would have seen last year. We're doing this not just because former students deserve a fair go themselves, but also to make the system fairer both now and in the future. Because we want everyone to be able to access education, no matter who you are, where you're from, or what you earn. This is what breaks down barriers for people. This is what creates livelihoods for families. And this is what an Albanese Labor government is always going to do. Health is a huge priority for the Albanese government. We know that Australians need to be able to access our world-class healthcare affordably whenever they need it. And I know that in the north it has become harder to access that care, whether that's seeing your GP, receiving emergency healthcare, or access to mental health support. That's why Labor is pulling out all stops to make this easier, and I thank the House.
The time for the grievance debate has expired. The debate is interrupted in accordance with Standing Order 192B. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting. And I call the clerk.
Government business. Next order of the day, Health Legislation Amendment, Modernising My Health Record, Sharing by Default Bill 2024, resumption of debate on second reading.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Bath.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, the Coalition will not oppose this bill passing the House. However, while the Coalition supports the My Health Record and patients having more timely access to their records, the Coalition will be seeking to refer the bill to committee in the Senate for further scrutiny. We want the committee to fully explore any potential issues related to the bill around privacy, as well as to achieve greater understanding on which other health providers will also be subject to the new mandated requirements. The bill establishes a legislative framework for requiring key health information to be shared with the My Health Record system, which will be subject to exceptions. Under this legislative framework, corporations providing health services will be required to register and participate with the My Health Record scheme. These health services will also be required to upload specific health information to healthcare recipients' My Health Record. The bill's fact sheet states that key details, including which health services and what information about those health services must be shared under these changes, will be set out in currently unseen rules. We understand that initially this will be limited to pathology and diagnostic imaging information. However, the committee will explore further details regarding what else will be contained in the rules and which other sectors may be impacted. Through a Senate inquiry, we'll also be seeking to explore the effect of this bill in making Medicare benefits conditional upon meeting these sharing by default requirements, as well as the fact that new civil penalties will also apply to corporations who do not comply. However, it's important to note that patients will continue to have full choice and control over what information is uploaded to My Health Record and who has access to this information. Prescribed information will only be required to be uploaded to My Health Record, subject to the patient's consent. The patient holds full control over what records are shown to practitioners. Once again, the Coalition supports My Health Record and patients having more timely access to their records. When last in government, the Coalition significantly increased the number of Australians with a My Health Record from around 25% to 90%. The Coalition also introduced a series of legislative amendments to significantly strengthen Labor's original legislation. This included increasing the penalties for improper use of a My Health Record, strengthening provisions to safeguard against domestic violence, prohibiting an employer from requesting and using health information in an individual's My Health Record, and protecting employees and potential employees from discriminatory use of their My Health Record, and ensuring law enforcement agencies can only access a person's My Health Record with a warrant or court order. However, we do believe that this legislation deserves further scrutiny in the Senate, particularly around the details that will be contained in the unseen rules and how they will impact health providers. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Speaker. The Greens will be supporting this bill in the House of Representatives and reserving our position in the Senate. We are in support of effective care pathways to promote greater cooperation and coordination between health services and systems. Furthermore, the Greens believe that health information and data linked to identifiable individuals should be stored with the best up-to-date security systems and protocols. There have been considerations raised by advocacy groups about the potential effects of this bill on healthcare providers. There is a likelihood that not all practices that will be subject to this legislation currently have the technical capability for the relevant information sharing. Upgrading software systems can be a costly endeavour and could be a process that would delay compliance. The Greens want to hear from the impacted practitioners about the impact that this bill would have on them. Because of this, We would like to see an inquiry into this bill, which will then inform our position in the Senate.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the law relating to electronic health records and Medicare benefits and for other purposes.
Our message has been received from Her Excellency the Governor-General recommending, in accordance with Section 56 of the Constitution, an appropriation for the purposes of this bill. If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I will put the report question immediately. The question is that this bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. In accordance with the resolution agreed to on Monday, the 25th of November 2024, the Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.